welcome everyone today to our three-part Lunch and Learn series. So purpose of this is to really try and highlight GP, where it is today, and then what your life might look like if you were to do the same thing in Acumatica versus GP. And then we'll be doing the next part of this series will be against Business Central. So you can see GP to Business Central. And then the final one will be Acumatica versus BC, and kind of allow you to see and contrast the two different potential other products if you were to choose to move away from GP onto a cloud platform. That being said, so as previously, I will be presenting today. So agenda for today: what's the current status of Microsoft Dynamics GP? What is the modern life cycle, the current policy? Then we're going to talk about Acumatica that's born in the cloud. The reason it's been born in the cloud is born in 2008. It's a true modern ERP born in the cloud. It's one of the Acumatica has one software product. It's focused only on making their software better, and with that continued focus to make the platform a low-code, no-code, which is one of their primary initiatives to make it highly configurable without having to get developers involved. We'll go through some commonly used functionality with similar functionality in Acumatica. So we're going to go through the user interface, some navigation functionality, searching for information, storing information, sharing, some core accounting tasks. Really going to focus on the payable side, just so you can get a feel of how that would look GP versus Acumatica. I'm sure many of you are familiar with how that's done in GP. Almost everyone that uses GP uses it for payables. Then we'll focus on reporting, what your options are there. We'll talk about GP. I'm not going to do a lot of hands-on GP unless I felt it was an area that maybe not all of our GP users are aware of. But I'll be doing more hands-on with the Acumatica platform. And then we'll talk about automations. And then follow-up will be questions at the end. So GP's modern lifecycle. So if you're on GP 2013, 15, 16, or 18, you're not considered in the modern lifecycle. You're in a fixed lifecycle. So that means that you are in most cases out of mainstream support with Microsoft, which just means that you're not getting any tax updates. So if you were running payroll on one of those versions, you'd be in trouble, right? Outside of that, regulatory updates for 1099 reporting, things of that nature, are no longer going to happen for those versions. With that being said, 2013 is the product that is out of extended support as well, which means that when you're talking about virus and any other type of updates that would be security related, they're no longer producing those for GP 2013, 2013 R2. So you can see 2015 goes through April of next year. Then we've got 2016, 2018 that continue out. So you see the extended port. So there still are going to be updates, but they're not going to be feature enhancements. They're not going to be any regulatory or tax updates. It's strictly just security and vulnerabilities that they're going to be addressing for 2016 and GP 2018. So in 2019, Microsoft released the modern lifecycle. So, and that's when they became 18.2. So we had 18.2 in 2019, and today the current release is 18.5. So with that modern lifecycle, you're receiving all the updates, including tax, features, functionality, whatever updates and enhancements they're making to GP. Microsoft is including that in that update. But keep in mind, these updates, in Microsoft's eyes, you need to stay within the last year of the latest release to be considered in mainstream support to go to Microsoft support. Our general consensus is that as long as you're within 18 months of the latest release, Microsoft's not going to decline the support, and Cal's always going to be able to support you. The question becomes if you have an issue with tax-related updates. Those are the ones that are most critical. There are some minor feature releases that are coming out, but just keep in mind that that it's not really going to evolve a whole lot. Microsoft hasn't made a lot of enhancements to GP over the years. They have done some features. PO requisitions were added, and predominantly around workflow, and then some usability functionality. So 18.5 is the current release, which came out October of last year, and then October of this year, we're going to see 18.6 come out. So with that being said, I want to get into the demo for GP to Acumatica. So in order to do that, I'm going to be doing a combination of slides, GP showing actual live GP and live Acumatica. So I'm going to go ahead and stop using my camera just so that way I have the real estate to be able to see what I'm doing as I'm navigating. But I'm going to continue to share my screen. I'm going to be just overlaying the different screens as we get started here. All right, so first thing, access, login, company selection. So GP's client server application, it does have a web client option, which means that you can run GP in a web browser. But all users need to access GP by either a desktop application or the web client. There are no other options. The web client is basically an add-on that kind of runs in a web browser. It does work. It's just, again, it's not a true browser-based application. Acumatica is considered a true cloud application. It can be accessed from anywhere as long as the user has internet connection. With that being said, it can be accessed through any browser, through any platform or browser. So whether it be a MacBook, a Chromebook, Windows, could be Safari browser, Chrome, Edge, they all work. They're all going to get you, depending on the size of your screen, it's going to scale. So they call that responsive design. So it's going to scale to the size of your screen. And then because it is a true cloud platform, included with the subscription for Acumatica, you would have access to mobile devices. So they have iOS and Android app, and you basically are able to log into that app, and you can complete some functionality and access information on that mobile device as well as in the cloud. So that's what makes it, again, what they consider a true cloud platform. GP can have multiple databases. We do have a large number of customers that run multiple databases with GP. Companies without the add-on multi-entity management, the users would need to log into each database/company in order to do any functionality in there. And I'll kind of highlight that in a minute just so everybody's clear on that. Each database/company has separate master records without, again, multi-entity management, which is an add-on for GP. It takes that one GP database and allows you to then segment into multiple companies and share master records when you want to. So that being said, Acumatica has basically what the equivalent of MEM is, that type of functionality built into it. It can also use separate databases if there was some necessity to do it that way. But for most, they're able to accomplish what they're looking to do within a single, essentially, database, and then using that MEM type functionality to allow you to log in, log out easily between the different companies versus actually having to do a hard log out, log in that you would with GP. Acumatica does allow you to restrict sharing of these master records. So by user or by entity, if you will, / company branch. So that concept of being able to log in and, if I don't have access to one of these branches or one of these companies, I won't even see it in my list, right? I can't get access to it. If that vendor or customer is restricted to just that given company or branch, then I'm not going to be able to see it or access their information in any way, shape, or form. It's built into the way the product works. So while using a single database / tenant in Acumatica's terms, in Acumatica, security controls which companies and or branches the user have access to, and it's easy for them to move between the companies and branches. Let me bring up my GP. So this is a local version of GP I have loaded up here. And you can see right now I'm logged into Fabricam. And then based on that, my login that I did first, I would then see which company I wanted to log into, and I would select this, and then it would jump over into that company. And again, it's got to do the whole reload of the application and reload all the security related to it to figure out, okay, what should I have access to in this database, which is one of the reasons you see GP is typically, for some people, it can be quite slow to log into because it's figuring out, and it's which screens do I have access to, which menus do I have access to, what information do I have. So it does that as you log in. So that being said, if I'm trying to work, right, if I need to process lots of transactions for lots of different companies, right, because that's my business model, then I'm going to continually be doing this, log out, log in, and that's going to be a slow process for many. So I'm going to jump over to this version of my Acumatica, which is a local version that I have here. But you can see here, if I were to sign out, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? These are essentially separate tenants or companies / databases in GP's terms, right? And I would I'm going to log into company 1. So that's if I truly needed to have separate tenants that I need to have very different everything about my Acumatica, you can do that. Again, that's not what most people will do. They're going to use this model where I can have company 1, this company doesn't have branches. My company 2 has 2 branches and my company 3 has 2 branches, right? So I can jump in, I can start, I'm going to go into this company and now it's loading up everything for that company. I might finish and now I got to go to products retail. And I might do some transactions here for products retail, but because while I'm in products retail, if I need to do a transaction for a different branch, I can do that right from the transaction. So I'm not having to truly jump in, jump out everywhere. So that functionality of giving the user, again, if you're running lots of different companies and the users are continually having to jump or process transactions for different entities, then this is going to get them to be able to do so a lot quicker because they can just switch in between each of the entities as they go. So that's really the difference in the logins. Again, that you can have in Acumatica, you can have different color schemes as you switch between the companies and or branches. You can have a different logo. So therefore the users don't get confused on which entity or branch / company they're in. So that you definitely have all of that capacity, as well as the ability to have the logo that you want on your reports be different for that given branch / company. So the idea here is to try and make it so that way it's global. You don't need to go and make a lot of hard changes on your reports and things. You can pretty much run, as long as the same basic report is generating, but you want a different logo on it, then you just make those changes. And again, the color schemes would also easily be changed for those given entities. Again, so TrueCloud versus GP's server client. Again, web client is available, but you're still running essentially a server in the back end that is communicating with a web. We're basically running a web server to run the web client. All right. So navigation and home pages. Some big differentiators here. GP has modules or navigation panes on the left side, and Acumatica has workspaces on the left side. So as we're jumping into GP, now this GP happens to be a remote desktop, which many of our GP clients are familiar with, right? So I have to start up a VPN, and then from the VPN, I can connect the VPN, and then I can go run a remote desktop session, and I'm running GP as if it's on my local environment, but it really is running on a remote server somewhere. But GP, here's his navigation panes. Now, in older versions of GP, that didn't exist, and everybody had to go through the menu tree, and I still see some people do that today, where they go this through the menu tree here, or they go to cards and reports, and you have the full flexibility of deciding which way is the most efficient way for me, right? But I can also go to purchasing, and then I get the full access of purchasing options here again. So the navigation pane. In addition to the navigation pane, you have navigation lists. Now, not a lot of GP users use navigation lists. There's some reasons why. Many times people feel they're kind of slow, which, it is trying to load a lot of things all at once, especially if you're exposing Business Analyzer, which is where you can kind of get into all the KPI metrics that Microsoft had added at one point, right? So as I'm clicking between my different master records, the data or KPIs over here are changing. So, it's great information. It was good functionality when they added it. This is static information, so there's no click through, there's no drillability to be able to get to this information. So, but again, GP's navigation lists on the left here, our navigation panes on the left, and then our navigation list within this to show different transactions. And there is some functionality within these that you can utilize that allow you to filter and create new filters, which again, Acumatica has some similar functionality. So there's my Business Analyzer again. Here in GP, you have the ability to drag and drop columns, unlike smart lists, where you can't drag the columns, you have to move them in the column configurator. So there's functionality here, and then you have the filtering to add filters. And this doesn't have really a limitation like smart lists do to the 4 filters, but it does get very cumbersome to use. It also has functionality at the top here. Again, some similarities to Acumatica and the fact that I can create a new invoice from here, in this case, a payables transaction, and so forth and so on. So you do have some functionality in here that, like I said, not everybody in GP is aware of, but there are, again, a lot of similarities between this look and feel, right? And what ultimately we find is similar to our Acumatica. Jump over to Acumatica. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and log out of my Acumatica here. This is the one that's actually configured for this session. So when I come into Acumatica, I've got my tenant, and again, I'm using one tenant, and I've got multiple companies with multiple branches. So I have my login. At that point, it's going to take me into my default branch, and it's going to load my default homepage. So, and we'll talk about home pages in a minute in more detail. But here is Acumatica. On the left side, I've got my, in this case, they're called workspaces, not navigation lists or navigation panes. But I have a similar, I have my payables workspace, and then I've got some more frequently used. I've got some actions across the top here that I can do things with, create a new bill, create a new vendor. And if I want to see all of the information, again, similar to GP, I've got transactions. Instead of cards, I have profiles, processes, similar to routines. Obviously, transactions are the same, inquiries and printed forms versus reports. Again, a lot of similarities, different architectures. So we talked about that responsive design I mentioned earlier. This is responsive design with Acumatica. So the screen is scaling, things are moving around as I adjust the size of the screen until I get to a point where it's pretty much as small as I can get. Again, the point being is that this, whatever I'm running it on, will allow me to scale to that and still have full access to everything within this application. So again, this is our workspace for payables. If I want to jump back to my home page, I would click here on Acumatica, and it's going to bring me back to my default home page, which is the AP Clerk dashboard. So this dashboard has basically everything I need to know about my work, right? What I need to do. So this is Acumatica's homepage. Again, going back to GP for a second. If I go to the home button up here, where it's going to take me? It's going to take me back to my homepage. In GP's case, the homepage, I can add reminders, I can add tasks, I can have quick lists, which are similar to Acumatica's favorites. Business Analyzer, which is basically dashboards. Again, these are not clickable, but it does allow you to scroll through these and see business metrics that have been added using, as I said, RS KPIs. I can have my favorite reports here where I can launch one directly from here. And then they do give you, for the homepage, the ability to have procurement on here, which is basically the purchase requisition module, which is one of the more newer modules that Microsoft, or functions that Microsoft had added to GP. So again, homepage here, our navigation list in GP, and our Acumatica. So if I click similar, it's going to take me back to my homepage. So it's important to know that. Now, the difference with this page is this is highly configurable. This is easy to configure. It's easy to create new widgets within the space. And these widgets are not just informational, right? So if I want to see all the documents on hold, I just click on that widget and it's going to do a drill down and bring up all the documents that are on hold. Other key differences here, right? So I can enter an AP bill, similar to the navigation list, but it's on that main, my main homepage. So I've got a widget up here to enter an AP bill, cards, but you can add these very easily. So it's really what is important for that given set of users that might be doing that job function that need quick access to what they need to do. So these are widgets, which just have some, basic look and feel. Over here, we've got an AP aging. If I click on that, again, it's drill through capabilities, so I can actually see where these numbers are coming from. And now I've got the details, right? So this is what Acumatica would call a generic inquiry. We're going to dive into generic inquiries, GIs, a little later, but just keep in mind that these are essentially Acumatica's lists. They also call them primary lists. If it was a case of a vendor or something of that matter, you would have a vendor list. So I go to purchases and I go to vendors. I'm on a primary vendor list, right? So again, the point being, all these lists are powering based on the generic inquiry platform that's built into Acumatica, which is really what makes this platform what we feel is one of the biggest differentiators between this and the other solutions that are out there, because it was built in an era when, we were already in smartphones. We were not in flip phones or analog. We were at a different era. GP was built in an era of, analog everything, right? And it's still a strong platform today, but there's just inherent, without doing a complete rewrite of everything from scratch, it's never going to be, a completely new platform again. So these are drill through capabilities, these dashboards, easy to add the dashboards to these. And again, it's going to be into list. So I have a designer security role assigned to me. So if I hit design, I can now start adding widgets, moving things around, changing them. If I want to look at the details behind these, they're very simple. So it's opening a generic inquiry, and it's using that data to say, I want to show all the records, and then I set up some filter settings if I have any. So basically you're able to then present this. So again, it's not this is low code notebook, right? I mean, this is not a developer having to do this. A little technical capabilities, and you don't need to have a developer design this information. So as I scroll down, I can see more information. Again, I can have as much information on here as that job function needs, right? So overdue balances, vendor purchasing trends. Again, these are all clickable. As you see, as I'm highlighting, you see all the trend lines being marked. And then down at the end here, I've got a bunch of open tasks. So there are task functionality within Acumatica. GP does have tasks, but it doesn't have quite the level of capabilities that Acumatica tasks have. So you can create a GP task, and basically I have it on a list now that I have to do something, and I can click it. Where these tasks can send me email notifications. I can get all kinds of functionality around these tasks, and they can be linked to almost any type of transaction. So it's important to keep that in mind. Other facets of Acumatica that make it different, right? So if I were to go to my vendors primary list, but you can see here, there's an option for new. So that's basically going to create a new vendor within my same screen. But if I go back to here, and maybe I want to look up a different vendor, I can do a right button click and open a new tab. So maybe I want to pull up this vendor here and look at something there. So again, point being is I'm not restricted to one card being open or one transaction for the same type of transaction being open at any given time. I could have 10 vendors open. I could have all the vendors' different invoices being open. I can basically do all my research. I can jump between the different things that I need to do. I could have this tab being open in my capital, right? Because I'm working on something for this, and then I get a request over here in products wholesale. And again, if I'm using that color branding, then I'd be able to see the difference easily right there between them. So just keeping that in mind that you can basically work however you need to work without having limitations of the system saying, no, I've got to close that screen, I got to finish what I'm doing before I can go on to the next thing. All right, so navigation lists, functionality and use, Acumatica workspaces, primary lists, GP user homepage, again, very limited. Acumatica's homepage is very configurable. Again, you can really put anything that you want on there. The dashboards are fully configurable. The tiles, maybe I didn't highlight what the tile was. Sorry, I'm jumping around, I know, but I want to highlight this appropriately. So if I go back to my homepage here, in this particular one, I've got, these are tiles. So this enter a bill, cash purchases. Again, very simple to create them and have them then launch over to that. So a tile could be this cash purchases. You can see I created a new tab. Over here, vendor profiles, that is an actual report link. So it's going to be able to run a report. You can basically create any of these links to do anything. So what do I do most often, right? Do I want to see the vendor details, which is basically their open, all the open documents and the payables transactions, right? So what do I need? And then, you know, as I'm done with that tab, I can close that tab. Some people work within one tab. I don't personally think it's the most efficient way to work, but certainly there's people find the way that works best for them to keep what they are doing in front of them, right? So dashboards are fully configured. Tiles are really important to be able to make commonly used actions based on the role. Widgets are everything else that you're seeing here. These are all widgets, right? So widgets can be many different things. They can be like these. They can be full dashboards with interoperability. It could be a web page. So really, you can add a lot of different things as widgets. GP has quick links on its home pages, right? Acumatica. So Acumatica has. So if I'm going over here, I don't necessarily need to have quick links, but I can make, if I'm constantly going to my vendors, right? And I want to see the vendors quickly. Now I've got this star as a favorite. So I go over here to favorites. I've just added vendors on it as a favorite. So kind of like quick links, only except you can do this for reports. You can do this for anything in the system, right? That I access often, right? So if I go to my payables again, you know, I've got reports, any of the things that are on the screen, the sitemap for Acumatica can be added as a favorite. And then when I access it, I can just really operate between my home page and my favorites. And I don't really need to start navigating all over the place to find what I'm looking for. Again, GP, my home page, right? I've got my quick links. So as I mark my quick links, and then I can have my reports be my hard copy reports, and I could even add a smart list into this list. But again, it's somewhat restrictive in what you can do and how it works. And then when you're, you know, if you expand this, everything else it shrinks up. So again, it still has the functionality. And like I said, a lot of people use it and it works. It's just, you know, we're now going to the next level here with Acumatica and what you can do with that. So navigation through searching. I can't really do that through GP. There's just really no good way to do that. But in Acumatica, there's something called a global search. And the global search is this box up here. So what do I want to do? So I want to go to vendors. As I start typing, it starts filtering all the results across the entire application for menu items. This is under menu items, right? So I got my payables, vendors appear under payables, vendors appear under purchasing, and then there's an inquiry that also has the word vendors on payment hold that's available, right? If I go to transaction and profiles, I'm going to find anything that has the word vendors in it. So I've got a PO that happens to have the word vendors in it. Drop ship from 2 vendors. You can see it highlighted there. I've got some generic inquiries, which are basically inquiries. I go to my help topics. I can find all the help topics that are related to vendors, right? And if I happen to have any files that got tagged with vendors, they would actually be file attachments. So in this case, I've got a Kroger's completed W-9. If I click on that, it's going to take me right to that actual file itself. And I could actually access that file. I could download it, see what it looks like. You know, basically all these files are attachments then for the records in Acumatica. And we'll get into that in a little bit too. I'm going to use the back button here. It takes me back to the prior screen that I was on. So maybe I don't necessarily know more than the name of the company, right? So if I knew the name of the company was AA Services, I don't have any menu items named AA Services. Then it says, oh, well, I've got a vendor and I've got an AP bill and I've got everything else associated to it, right? So I've got AP bill 003341, right? I don't think I have any help topics that, well, I guess it's finding the word services, sure. And then I have a screenshot out here on AA Services for, again, an example of a file. But if I go back to my transaction and profiles here, let me say 3341. All I know is they're inquiring about invoice number 3341. So again, no menu items, searching. You can see I've got different, I got an AR payment that came from a different customer for 3341, but I can easily find the fact that they're talking about this invoice. And now I can look at this invoice and see what's going on with it, right? So here it is. It's currently in a closed status, which means it's been paid. And I can see the application, the payment that was issued. It's issued quite a while ago, so we might be concerned it might have got lost. I can, again, all the blue underlines in Acumatica are hyperlinks, which is going to, in this case, it opens up an extra screen here, which is basically a payment that went out by check for all of $5. So again, you can see the application history where it's tying it back to the invoice. So you have all that similar information that you might have in GP. And of course, from here, if for some reason they said they never got it, you can see I've got the void button right on the screen itself. I don't need to go to a different screen and say void my historical transaction. In GP, I would, right? So the capabilities of getting through all of that more quickly, again, a little easier to do. Searching, storing, sharing info. Again, GP options, we've got our inquiry screens, our smart list, and our navigation list. Acumatica, we've got our global search. We've got inquiries, which are throughout the system, and those are the easiest things to create based on recreating generic inquiries that are designed really for what you need. There's reports, file attachments, help topics, so moving columns. Important that you're aware of moving columns. So let me start over here at my vendors. Again, this is part of the platform, and these are all generic inquiries behind the scenes, right? So I've got, similar to GP, I've got a column configurator where I can add additional information to it. I can move it around this way. That's just like smart lists. Again, that doesn't work on a standard GP, but it does work on a smart list that way, not a standard GP screen, like the vendor inquiry screen, but you kind of get the idea. We do have in GP the ability to search with smart lists. Not everybody is aware of that. So I jump over to GP and then look at that. So I go to my purchasing, I go to my vendor card, right? I'm in here, this is the standard lookup. So I got smart list designer favorites, I got additional sorts. So you have other ways to be able to look up data through basically leveraging smart lists. You just have to really drill deeper to get there with GP. So here I can move my columns around. When I'm doing that, it's remembering for me as a user, it's not affecting anybody else. I can take columns away, right? So if I don't need to see the currency ID because we're always in US dollars, I'm good, right? So that's a simple way of being able to customize it for the user, right? Then Acumatica has these quick search functionalities, which again, in the generic inquiry, you just basically put a checkbox as to which columns you want to include in the quick search. And then when I start typing, it starts searching. So it's highlighting where it's finding, in this case, SER. So service, as I'm starting to type services, I can find this. So that's one way. Again, it's searching all the columns that are marked for the given quick search functionality. If I go back to this full list, I could also use the search in here. So I could say it contains SEVR, and I'm just looking now at the vendor name, and I'm doing that, and then I can get rid of that. Okay. If I come in here and I want to easily find all the vendors that are product vendors. So if I highlight the word product under vendor class and I do a Shift F, it automatically applies that filter for just product vendors. And if I hit it again, it's going to release it. Or I could, again, if I do Shift, I can click here and clear the filter. So it's building those filters more quickly. Again, you want to be able to find what you need as quickly as you can. So I can move my columns around. Again, that's a generic inquiry. When I go back to my vendors list, there's also something in Acumatica called side panels. So this is the primary list for vendors. If I'm on A services and I want to look at the vendor information, I can open that up as a side panel. Again, this is low code functionality. Literally just go into the GI and say, generic inquiry, I want to now include this screen as a side panel and pass the vendor ID over to it. And now I've added it so I can literally edit the vendor without having to leave my list. Now, this may not be something I would use quite often on vendors, but I might use it a lot if I'm editing a bunch of items and I want to change all their descriptions. I could filter for those search items and go right down the list, right? If I want to see their bills and adjustments, it's another side panel. Vendor details are going to be all their AR activity. This is the actual screen if I want to show. And as if I could switch to vendors, now I'm going to see a lot more information. You can see this is automatically filtering for the branch that I'm in. But if I rub out the branch, because I have access to all the branches, I would then see all of the transactions. Again, I can maximize the screen. So if I want to see it, again, it's all the same functionality that's in everywhere else. All the grids work the same. You can see here there's attachments on every line, just like I had an attachment at the document header levels. So again, GP has doc attached at the header levels. Acumatica has it at the line level, at the header level, pretty much everywhere you want to go. Open purchase orders. So again, I'm able to see that. Again, I can control whether or not it's a full screen, partial screen here by this little button. Right, so I'm on this generic inquiry and I created another generic inquiry called AP vendor spend, right? So maybe I want to add that to here. So I'm now, this is the actual generic inquiry editor. So this is a primary list and ends with PL. You can see the tables that are accessing, but what I want to do is I want to go to navigation. I'm going to go over here, spend. Again, this is low code, no code. I want to tell it what to do with it. So I want to open the same tab, new tab, pop-up window, or side panel. I want it to be a side panel. Now what do I need to pass? I need to pass a parameter. So the vendor account code. Coming over here to my vendor account code. Not very hard. Again, it's a platform, the way it's been designed, it's designed for you to be able to do this kind of things. So now I've got vendor spend over here. I guess I messed something on my parameter, but the idea is easily to, I just passed the wrong parameter. But at the end of the day, purposes, it's easy to get these things added. I don't spend a lot of time on that. So GP Smart List, again, you can move the columns, but it's limited. You have add-ons for GP that if you wanted more capabilities within your Smart List, you can add other products to GP. Smart View, Advanced Smart List, all those enhance that functionality, giving not limiting to the 4 search options with standard Smart List. So Acumatica's primary list, quick search fields, and you can mark which columns are searchable. GP user defined fields, very limited throughout the system, depending on which record type you're dealing with. Acumatica has a concept of attributes. So your attributes, you're easily able to create an attribute and then add that attribute to a given screen. So you're literally just going into the attributes. Again, if you have access to this screen, the setup screen, as you know, based on the user security. And then you can select a different data type. So you've got a combo, which is drop-down list, and a multi-select combo, which is pretty cool. So attributes come into play because I can add that. And again, this is not just for vendors, it's throughout the entire system. All I do is say what I want to include on my given so in this case, it's product vendors. And I say vendor demo, I add that. Now if I refresh my screen, again, I'm just refreshing the browser, it reloads it. I now got a new attribute, and I can select their 1 and 3. Again, so when it comes to storing information, any information that you need to know about, whether it be a transaction or a master record, you have that capability. So if I go to my bills and adjustments, pull up an existing one, and again, if I have access, which I do, manage user defined fields, I can now add a user defined field. Again, I would crypt it, most likely have different attributes or user defined fields. But by doing that, it makes it available here. And again, I'm able to still save that to this historical record. So again, when you're trying to think about information, how you can use that, it becomes really important for many. Microsoft GP does have Extender, which again, it can get you the same way. It's just, you have to add all these things onto GP. This is all inside the box with Acumatica. As you can see here, I've got some color coding going on in Acumatica as well. So the transactions that are balanced or on hold are highlighted in yellow and bold. If the transaction is open, so it hasn't been paid yet, so the status is open, right? That open is in bold, and then the other ones are not. And that's really, again, just simple GI functionality. On top of the GI functionality, you can also do such things inside of this screen, such as searching. So that's a pivot, sorry. So this is open AP details, right? So I've got just the open transactions, and I've got a sum, right, of what my net open is. So, and if I were to just want to look at a given vendor, again, I can just do Shift F, see what I owe that given vendor. I owe $4,000, right? So this is all within the primary list of the bills and adjustments now. And then I could also have another filter. And again, these filters are really simple to create. So, and as long as you have access to it, you can even create shared filters that everybody could use. Again, kind of similar to Smart List, except that it's all within the one list. Instead of having to jump out of my payables transaction and open a Smart List, it's right here within the same list, being able to do all that functionality. So this is an example of a pivot table that is built right into this. Again, I did say that pivots are part of the core functionality. So here I've got 2 different ones. This is by branch. So go ahead and change that. And again, just to show you how simple it is to do, I'm going to drag out the branch. So now I've just got vendor name, and the net open amount. And if I go over here, I want it to sort in descending order so I can see who I lost money to. Click the gear, and now it flips back to it. And now, again, this is a fully functional pivot within the application. I don't have to export out to Excel. I don't need to do anything else. It's all within the application. I'm literally on the bills and adjustment screen. There are other places you can build real pivots inside Acumatica as well, but this is pretty easy to use. And again, if I use the drill down capabilities, you can see it just brings me right to that record. So file attachments. Started to talk about that earlier. So go to this build, which is currently open. We got files up here. Multiple ways to get files in. So most people will not use the upload, browse and upload, but you can. So if you've got a, sorry, I'm just opening my folder. Right, so if I've got a particular file, I can just drag it. It automatically attaches it. And if I click on it, it'll open the associated. So you literally can drag and drop and have as many files there as you need. If there was something going on in this particular line, right? So there I would actually go and browse to that, and I could add a particular detail right to that given line, right? So if there was maybe a picture of damage on the product or something like that, right? Again, this is an AP bill, but this one is tied to a purchase order. So keeping that in mind as we get a little further along here. Again, I mentioned the low code, no code functionality. Acumatica is sharing info. So emailing is built into the application as well. So pretty much throughout the application, you can create emails, generate emails. The generic inquiries can be exposed to OData. So if you're trying to share that information, you don't want somebody to have to actually log into Acumatica. They could just open the Excel spreadsheet that has, and as long as they have credentials, they can refresh it, and it's going to pull whatever information they have security access to into that Excel file, so they can easily see that. Acumatica is also designed with unlimited users in mind, so you really don't need to restrict or control. You just basically set up your security. So if they only need a little bit of information, just give them access to it. Now they don't have to ask anyone. You don't have to share it. It's right there available to them. All right, so focus on accounting, AP, payables, what we want to talk about here today. So let's go through a simple AP invoice, and we'll show you some additional functionality. I'm sure everybody's aware of GP's payables transaction entry. It is separate from GP's three-way match processing, right? You have your purchasing invoice entry, which you do AP invoice matching, and you've got payables transaction entry, and they are completely separate screens. Acumatica is the same screen. The users keep it real simple. I could potentially have, I could have a three-way match that has a miscellaneous charge on it for something that I wasn't aware of, and I could potentially add that right to my bill, right? Or I could use landed cost if it made sense there as well. So again, in order to do that, if I'm an AP clerk, right, I'm going to go back to my home page and say I'm going to enter a bill because I have an invoice in front of me. So what do I know about the vendor? I mean, I just know their name. If I know their ID or their name, it's going to pull up as soon as I start typing which one I know. If I didn't, if I wasn't finding it that way, I could go into this search, and basically you see I can search all the information easily to find the right vendor. I don't need to go anywhere else. I don't need to know what that is. Again, this type of functionality can be added to GP with like Rockland SmartFill. Again, another product, great product. A lot of people use it, but again, you need to add that in order to do it built in here. So my invoice number, and if this is just a straight bill for services, I could go as simple as, this is $350, and then what is the default expense account? Acumatica has something called sub-accounts. Sub-accounts would be like if you're using GP and you have multiple segments in your chart of accounts, then rather than having to duplicate the GL account every time within your chart of accounts, you could literally just set up your separate sub-accounts that associate to your natural account. And therefore you don't have to have as large a chart of accounts. All right, so. Pretty simple, and we got all the other information here. If you needed to change it, terms, how I'm paying it, if it was calculating taxes, there is a whole approval process within Acumatica that's again built in. You can set up approval maps and such. You can see here though, here I have add a PO receipt, add a PO receipt line, add a PO. So again, this is combining the functionality of payables transaction entry with your invoice matching. So you really just operate from this one screen. Now, on top of that, what's important is when you see this tab, this button here in Acumatica's transaction screens, this is load from a file, right? So it's going to say choose a file. As long as I have that file out there, and it's got some similar, and it's basically going to, so if you have a Excel spreadsheet that has your vendor's info, right, that you need, I'm going to say insert all records from that file. And then it's going to look at the columns in the spreadsheet match what the Acumatica columns are, and then it's going to automatically default those columns in. If I don't have all the columns, right, I could change it and I could ignore it, right, if that column doesn't mean anything. And I can manually map them, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It now just uploaded my Excel file into my bills and adjustments here. So now I don't have to key in all those distributions. I could just upload them. Again, you can think of all different ways you could use this because it works throughout the system. So at this point, it's on hold, and remove my hold. And now you see something that's, again, an Acumatica feature, pre-release versus release. It happens quite often with GP, right? I get an invoice in, I got to get payment out to the vendor right away, but I'm not sure what to code it to. Well, pre-release would allow me to do that. Pre-release would allow me to get the payment out to the vendor, but it's going to classify this in such a way that it's being booked to a pre-release account that I can then come back later and reclassify this and then actually release it. So it's functionality that Acumatica adds that I think is a pretty cool feature that gives you that ability to do so, right? So that was a simple pay function. So Acumatica, as you might have seen there, I've got it starts on hold. So I'm going to go back to my prior bills. I'm going to just grab that one. Highlight functionality for copy and paste. So here, again, this is throughout the system, whether you master records, transactions, most places you'll see a copy function. And then when done copying it, click the plus sign, and I can paste. And now I can just change whatever's changed. So if you get repeating invoices that are very similar every month, and you don't want to set up recurring, then you can certainly do this. And then I can make my changes. Other things you can do here that is unlike GP, right? I could highlight all 3 rows, click delete, save. Oh, I didn't enter an invoice number. It's not allowing duplicates, so I can't use it. The other one. Remove hold. So this is now in a balance state, right? So sitting in a balance state means that everything is filled in, is ready to go, but I haven't released it yet. And so I can add notes here if I needed to, saying, you know, whatever, I'm waiting on something, waiting on backup. If I needed to, I could put it back on hold if I want to do that while I'm waiting on backup. So I have notes here. I've got line item notes. I've got document attached here. Up here, if I'm waiting on something, I can go to my activities. I can create a task for somebody or myself. I can add an email here where I can actually email saying, you know, I reached out to AA Services and I'm waiting for backup from them before I can move forward, right? So you can, built into the system. So I can go ahead and do that if I wanted to. And when I do that, it's going to actually record that as an activity under this transaction. So you'll be able to see all the activity that went on as things progress. And in this case, I'm not going to do a pre-release. I'm going to do a release, which is going to set it right into open. All right, I'm going to go back to my homepage. Process check run. So I'm going to be doing checks. Default that. So I have all my vendors here. Again, I have all the same grid functionality that I had before. So if I just wanted to pay one vendor, right, I could highlight that one vendor, Shift F, and I could check both of those. And I could process, or I could process an entire batch if I wanted to. Again, you've got all these search criteria. So if I want to try to pay product vendors, expense vendors, or a single vendor, I could use this as well. Right, and then you have all these restrictions to be able to see how far out or you want to look in advance of paying those due dates. And this is because I had queued some up previously. So now I've got 3 payments waiting to be processed. This is the only one showing to process, but I could process them all. And it has my next check number here. Again, for people that are using Acumatica Maker with GP, to be able to process and include all because my Acumatica has its own report designer, we're actually able to encode that in the report designer itself. So you don't necessarily need an add-on product, again, like GP, to have blank check stock. So here's my payment. Again, if everything's all good, I can release it. If I need to reprint it, I can. And do I want to reprint with a new number? In case, reprint would just be in case somehow I didn't print on check stock, I printed on blank paper for some reason, right? I'd be able to do so. I'm going to go ahead and release that. So interesting, keep in mind that the way Acumatica works, it doesn't do distribution summary the way that GP does. So all your line details on your bill, whether it be an invoice match or whether it be a regular, what GP would consider payable transaction entry, right? All those details, including the item level details, go into the GL. So you have full reporting and visibility. It makes it a lot easier. You're not trying to figure out, how did I get to this summary number that came from the sub ledger? You're going to see all that detail in your general ledger. Reporting. So GP, printed reports, forms, report writer, Word templates. Report writer, this report writer it's never advanced, right? Microsoft's whole intent was to switch everybody over to SQL reporting services and use that. And they did make inroads in adding a lot of the reports to be available in SQL reporting services, but they didn't have a way to add them easily to the menus to be able to run the SQL reporting services report. So you had to either use a navigation list or you just went into SSRS and you ran the report separately. So again, ease of use, not that easy all the time. Acumatica has a built-in modern report designer, easy to create new reports and add them to the sitemap. So I'm talking about the sitemap. This is everything that shows up in Acumatica and where it shows up, and I can literally move things, right? So if I create a new report, not modifying an existing one, I take a brand new report and I create it, right? I can literally just go in and you'll see all the reports in here. So I can literally add a new report to the sitemap, give it a name. Where do I want it to show up? Do I want to show up under payables, under reports? Where do I want to show up? And literally then it's now a new report in Acumatica. I don't have to go crazy trying to, in GP, if I use report writer, I've got to go to a separate place to run my custom reports because there's no way to add anything to the application itself as a new entry on the screen unless you do an add-on module, right? So Rockton has a product that helps with that functionality. But again, it's not something that we really want to have to do. You want it to be easy. You want to make it so it's seamless to users. So when you get a new user, oh, when you want to run that report, you got to go over here. And when you want to run that report, you got to go and do it this way, right? GP has its smart list. Again, big part of reporting in GP for most people is smart list. Can't do without it. Acumatica is at generic inquiries. In my mind, GP, if you have smart list builder, which really gives you the full flexibility of being able to join a lot of different things together and create custom smart lists. And then if you add on top of that navigation list builder, so that way you can then click on the row in the smart list that you've created with smart list builder and have it open an associated screen in GP, then you're getting close to the built-in functionality that exists in Acumatica, right? Because Acumatica has all of that capability built into it with the generic inquiries to be able to double click and open an associated transaction or have a side panel, or just I can open different things without having to add and do a lot of work. It's built-in functionality. Financial reporting. GP's got management reporter. Previous to that was FRX. Acumatica has something called ARM, Analytical Report Manager. They both have a similar concept of rows and columns. The difference being is Acumatica is built inside the platform. You don't have any data marks like you do with GP and with Management Reporter, where those can get out of sync and you got to resynchronize the data mark in order to get things back in sync. And on top of that, Acumatica's ARM is much faster than Management Reporter when you get into large data sets. Or you're getting into large data sets with MR, sometimes you got to literally just let the thing run 15, 20, half an hour, I've heard some people, right? So it can be that way. So if I go to financial, quick example of, financial report here, again, click run. This is, again, it's right within the application. It's just the person has security access to it, right? Drill through capabilities because they're blue hyperlinks. I've gotten the general ledger details now for that account. Just keep drilling back until I get to the exact, in this case, they call them batches, but they're journal entries. So here is the actual distributed details. So see here, and then if I go view source document, this was created from invoices and memos. I've got my customer. This is their AR invoice, and these are all the details. And you can see this is the line items on the AR invoice. You can see here is the details in the grid in Acumatica. And if I go over here, I can add even more info columns. And now I have the actual inventory ID and the customer vendor ID. So you should see full details within the financial side of things. Just gonna close up these screens. And again, these are very easy to create. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but if anybody wants to find out more about how this actually works, you can certainly reach out to us. Happy to do so. GP has KPIs, right? We showed those early on. Acumatica has dashboards. KPIs are static. Acumatica's dashboards, full functionality, drill through capabilities, real time. You can set the refresh rates on them, how quickly you want it to refresh, how often. Acumatica has pivot tables built into it. So that way you don't have to, again, export out to Excel. You can do the pivots within it. You can also, in Acumatica, if I go back to my payables, bills and adjustments, something that, again, there are add-on products for GPs that allow you to do this. Put sum totals at the bottom of your columns on your smart list. Again, it's invaluable to be able to do those types of features within the application itself, to be able to not have to necessarily run that report. I can just see it right in the list what I'm looking for. All right, and then GP auditing, right? Without an add-on, there's very little auditing about what happened to these given transactions. Acumatica, and again, I'm putting this under reporting because ultimately when you're looking at auditing, you're looking at the reports of what happened behind the scenes. How did we get to this point with this given transaction? Acumatica has audit history and field level audits built in. So if I go to my bills and adjustments screen, again, if I have access to do so, I can go to audit history. Right now you can see update history. It's not currently turned on. Enable it. And now I just have to pick what fields and tables do I want to audit, right? So this is somewhat technical, but at the end of the day, again, I wouldn't necessarily do this, which is basically selecting everything, because I don't really need to audit everything. But by checking that box and saving, it's now going to start auditing my bills and adjustment transactions and all the details behind it. It's that easy. Again, it's built in. Automations. Running a little bit low on time here. I'm trying to go as quick as I can. GP has very little in the way of automations, right? You can get integration managers through Microsoft, but it is essentially an add-on. Smart Connect is good for being able to do a lot of things. There are posting tools to help with auto post instead of having to do it manually. With GP Workflow with 18.4, which came out in 2021, they did add the ability for approvals through the GP workflow, through the GP application, where you, at the last step in the process, you would be able to post. So this is the button, automatically post when workflow is complete. So when it goes through that approval, it could actually post that transaction in GP. In 18.5, which was last year's release, the approvals can now originate from email approvals for mass, so these are the different types of transactions that you can approve. And then the ones that require posting can now be through an outside user, through an email approver. They could click approve and it would post in GP. So that is essentially an automation. Acumatica automations are throughout the system. So it has something called automation schedules, it has business events, it has workflows, approvals, and then it has import export tools. What I wanted to show you today, though, is another feature it has built into it, which is its document recognition. To be able to review and create AP and three-way matching bills. It also works with their Outlook add-in for Acumatica. All right. There's notification templates as well, which basically allow you easy through the business events. Right. I can set up a notification that would allow me to get some type of email notification, allowing me to notify me to do something, and even potentially create a task of what I need to do. Acumatica also has a retail commerce edition, which adds this additional functionality to have a complete built-in integration to Shopify, BigCommerce, and Amazon, and they're working on other connectors as well. So if you're in that space, again, it's built in. You're not having to add a bunch of different solutions that don't necessarily know how to work together, because Acumatica is building that functionality. Acumatica also API capabilities to allow ease of connecting to other apps. Again, it's fully wide open to be able to get information out of Acumatica and back into Acumatica through other applications. So with that, I want to jump into AP automations. So here I am on my AP clerk screen. Bring up my Outlook. So this is one way. I've got an invoice that came in. This is my Outlook add-in. I can just click, so I can click on the invoice and obviously see it in my Outlook. I just go to vendor, invoice number 201, and I want to create an AP document. And now it's inside of Acumatica waiting for processing. Okay, I can also go into my, I could also have it be emailed to Acumatica and have it be received, so if you tell your vendors, send all my invoices to this email address, Cal Business Solutions at apinvoices.com or whatever you want to call it, right? It would then be listening, and those documents would then be inside of Acumatica waiting to be processed. So here's the one I just pushed in, demo invoice 201, through my Outlook add-in. Again, but the same thing applies. I'm opening it up here. It's reading through its AI technology. It's reading this document and saying, okay, well, how do I know that? It says it's a vendor. So if I don't think that is right, I can highlight this information, and I can teach it to get the right one. So it related it to a vendor, which is correct. Look at that. Go-to vendor is a vendor. Very good. It defaulting to main, picking up the invoice date over here. It's using the vendor's default terms date. It recognized that most likely this is the invoice number / vendor reference. I could type in a description here, and it pulled in the services, my 2 line items, and put it down here. So if I'm good with this, I can save and continue. I now have an AP bill to remove the hold. If I want to release it, I can. So that's part of their AP automations. One last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new vendor. So I'll take this vendor and copy it. I guess it thinks the demo is over. And the purpose of doing that was that I have a business event that's notifying me as a manager that someone set up a new vendor, and it's going to send me an email saying you need to review this vendor. Right? It's also creating a task for me, telling me that I need to do that. So that business event would end ultimately. So here is that demo vendor, review vendor. Here's the task it created for me, and as well, I'm getting an email saying, hey, you need to review this. And this is what the body of that would be as well. So I could literally know that I need to review that. So again, a lot of capabilities, a lot of built-in functionality for automating the system. So with that, John, I don't think we have much time for questions and answers. Hopefully we were able to get through a lot of them in the chat. Keep in mind, GP's next release is scheduled for October 2023. So that's 18.6. Acumatica is releasing their 2023, so 23R2, release 2, scheduled for early October. And they have a virtual launch of the new feature functionality on October 5th. So we will be sending you a link for that if you're interested. And then again, we are your GP partner. So it's a big discussion, big decision to decide what do you do with GP, right? GP is not going anywhere. It's still here. It's still being supported. We're going to continue to support it as long as it's around. We'll have customers running it. It's a solid platform, but if you want, we're offering a free consultation. So that way you can do a deep dive, understanding what your GP needs are and what is the right solution for you. So our next Lunch and Learn in this series is going to be doing a similar type of comparison, GP functionality to Business Central functionality. And the fact that, again, keep in mind, Business Central is not a upgrade from GP, it is a migration. So you have to, either way, you need to migrate. So you got to pick the right solution for you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining today. And I hope you have a great day.